Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Schaefer. I am the Associate Director for Graduate Student Success and Professional Development. And welcome to our second Career Pathways guest speaker session for the spring 2025 semester. This is our Career Trajectories guest speaker. And I'm happy to have a colleague and friend, Dr. Shannon Heuberger, with us today. And due to the structure of her presentation, anything that I would introduce to you as a professional bio, she will be discussing. So I am going to turn it over to Shannon. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me today. Well, as students and postdocs at UTSA, you've heard a lot about the theme of creating bold futures. And you may have also heard thought leaders like Sheryl Sandberg encouraging you to think of careers not as ladders, but more like a jungle gym, where you might make some lateral moves to build different skill sets along the way. When I think about my own career path, the metaphor that comes to mind is like a scenic hike with a lot of fun overlooks, and where I've rarely known what was coming a couple miles up the trail. I'm going to tell you about my own career journey, beginning with graduate school and leading to where I am now, running my own business, Heuberger Strategies, as a strategic planning facilitator, where I help universities across the country with planning and visioning processes. And just like how no two people are the same, I don't expect that anyone would follow my own pathway entirely. But I do hope that my story will have a couple of helpful takeaways. I hope to be able to encourage all of you to be bold in saying yes to all kinds of opportunities, large or small, that sound fun to you, especially when they're at that nexus of what you enjoy doing and what you're good at. And I'll talk a little bit about AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship specifically as one such opportunity, because I know some of you here may be interested in science policy or other fellowships that help people with PhDs branch out into other new areas. Let me share my screen so you can see where I started. I got my master's degree and PhD in entomology, which is the study of insects. Is anyone else here who loves bugs? I actually worked in entomology labs for a number of years before starting grad school. In the pictures on the right here, I'm surveying insects in cotton fields in Arizona. And in the photos on the left, those are from some workshops on pest management in Zambia. Sometimes people with unconventional career stories are people who didn't enjoy their initial career path, or they found that it really wasn't a good fit. But I actually don't recall a moment like that. I really love doing research. But I was atypical as a grad student. Of course, those of you who are into statistics know that it's actually typical to be atypical. So all of us here who are most likely quirky in our own way, although I'm seeing in the chat, some of you are quirky in my way. Some of my quirks as a grad student were that I found it more fun to read general articles about scientific breakthroughs. For example, reading Science and Nature cover to cover, than reading everything there was to read in my own subdiscipline. And I could have told you in detail about every student in my department's research. I always found what everyone else was working on to be so interesting. And I taught fitness classes in the evenings because I loved meeting new people and helping them reach their goals. All of this seemed a bit eclectic and random at the time, but I'm getting towards an important point about embracing your unique interests, because you may be cultivating an interesting combination of skills that could take you somewhere unexpected. So I was on a whole bunch, probably dozens of science-related listservs, and one day an email came through advertising a job with the Union of Concerned Scientists. And it was for someone with a PhD from a science field who also had 3 years of policy experience. And the job was described as a liaison between scientists and policymakers. It sounded really exciting. Also working with other nonprofits, the public, I think the media, if I recall. And I'd never imagined before that jobs like that existed. And it just struck me as the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So question number 1 was, how does a scientist start getting whatever they mean by policy experience? So first I asked my advisor, who was thankfully extremely supportive, and he was also familiar with AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowships. And that pointed me in a life-changing direction. So let me sidetrack to tell you about AAAS fellowships, but first, I just want to reiterate that there are many opportunities like this out there. And while I'm always interested in promoting this one that I know a lot about, I really think the takeaway is to think outside the box about your career journey. So AAAS fellowships have been running for 50 years as an opportunity to provide policy experience for US citizens who have a PhD in a scientific discipline or who have a master's degree in engineering plus 3 years of professional experience. And these are year-long paid fellowships. You can learn all about the pay and benefits on their website. And most fellows participate in the opportunities that you see here on the left side of the diagram. So the current fellowship class has 280 fellows who are either in those legislative branch or executive branch fellowships. The legislative branch fellowships are the congressional fellowships. That's what I did. And then the executive branch fellowships are at federal agencies. There's one judicial branch fellow each year, and then the global stewardship fellow is awarded periodically. This graphic shows recent fellowship placements. So for example, you'll recognize the National Science Foundation, the Department of State, the Department of Defense, NASA, the National Institutes of Health is just a few of the examples. Now, most of the congressional fellowships are actually awarded by partner societies of the AAAS. So for example, my congressional fellowship was awarded by 3 societies who awarded one together: the American Society for Agronomy, the Crop Science Society of America, and the Soil Science Society of America. And you can learn all about the partner societies on the fellowship website. When it comes to applying to the partner societies, it's important to think outside the box about areas where you could qualify. And actually, that's advice that I think applies to many types of opportunities you could apply for in your career. I know many people who were awarded a congressional fellowship by a society where they didn't think their discipline was an exact match, but then they got it anyway. So the AAAS has been in touch with me about today's presentation, and they provided me with a form that looks like what you see here on your screen to pass along contact info for any of you who would like to stay informed about these opportunities. If you're interested in being added to this list, you can email me. You can see my email address at the bottom of the screen. And I'll assume your institution is UTSA and that I can use the name and email address that come through in your email unless you tell me otherwise. Just let me know your discipline and your education level, and I'll go ahead and sign you up to receive more information from them. The application deadline is nearly a year before your fellowship starts. So if you're interested in these, November 1 is an important date to keep in mind, although it's important to note that those partner societies have different deadlines of their own. And then getting back to this point that AAAS fellowships are just one of many opportunities that can take you in cool new directions. Here are just a couple more examples. So the AAAS Mass Media Science and Engineering Fellowship is a 10-week summer program that places science, engineering, and math students and postdocs at media organizations nationwide. And then the Christine Mirzayan Fellowship is a 12-week fellowship at the National Academies. And that's for either grad students who are in a terminal degree program or postdocs. I've known a lot of Mirzayan fellows. That's another wonderful program. I'll save that slide actually. So returning to my story, so then I knew I wanted to do a AAAS fellowship. And so I started spending a lot of time on their website, watching their webinars. And a common tip from former fellows was not to be afraid to reach out to people who could serve as resources, that this was a good way to get information and grow your network. So how many of you would feel super comfortable sending an email to someone you've never met before asking them for advice? So I'll say that that was something pretty intimidating for me at that point in time. But the truth is that you really don't have anything to lose. So I did what I'll recommend that you do if you're interested in any type of career pivot, and that's to think of your various networks. Are there any faculty, maybe in your department, but outside your research group, who might know about the area you're trying to get into? Like, if you think you might want to apply for a AAAS fellowship and could be interested in a placement in NSF, do you know a faculty member who's maybe been a program director there? Or thinking of UTSA faculty, even beyond your advisor and committee members who could be resources in an area of interest to you. And definitely don't be afraid to reach out to former fellows. People who have had these types of opportunities are usually really happy to help others out. So I know part of this speaker series is about career skills, and it occurred to me that no one ever told me how to write a good email outreaching to someone I didn't know for their advice. I think one thing that's helpful to know is that people in a lot of these roles get literally hundreds of emails a day, and they can be really busy people. So I recommend keeping your email very short and being as specific as possible about your goal. So for example, if you know you're planning to apply for a congressional fellowship next year, or you're on the fence about whether you want to apply for a congressional fellowship or a congressional fellowship and an executive branch fellowship, go ahead and say that. And if you have something in common with the person, like you're from the same discipline or you've gotten a degree from the same university, mention that. Or if someone suggested that you reach out to them specifically, mention that. And then I recommend keeping your ask down to one question. Like a good example would be asking if they happen to have any advice to share with you. And that really increases your chances of getting a response versus if you send them a long list of questions, which they just may not have time to tackle. And please feel free to add me to your outreach list if you're interested in policy opportunities. I would be delighted to talk with you more about fellowships and to even review your application if you'd like. So I found myself that slowly building a network of people who knew the policy realm was invaluable for figuring out what a fellowship would actually be like, deciding what type of fellowship I wanted to apply for, and then polishing up my application. I ended up getting a great fellowship placement in the office of U.S. Senator Jeff Merkley, and it was surreal going from working in the lab and field in entomology to writing legislation, preparing for and going to Senate hearings, working with offices across Capitol Hill and with nonprofits, businesses, federal agencies, universities, et cetera, to advance legislative priorities, working in some areas that I really care a lot about. It was so rewarding. And let me show you some pictures from my fellowship year. So on the left is a picture of the top of the Capitol Dome. Senator Merkley took a group of us on the Capitol Dome tour, including also my husband, who's on the far left here. The view on top is really amazing. It was definitely one of the highlights of my fellowship. And on the right, you can see me at a couple of Senate hearings. As those of you who watch C-SPAN know, the staff members sit in the chairs behind the members of Congress. And one great thing about the AAAS program is they frequently get all the fellows together, and there's a lot of occasions where they invite former fellows who are still working in the area. So you get a large network, and they all give each other advice. Like I remember someone telling me to keep a neutral gaze at the Senate hearings, because they said that having too much facial expression from the staffers can look awkward on camera, which is something I just don't think I would have guessed as an entomologist. So I was then able to leverage my experience working on Capitol Hill to land a great job at the University of Arizona as their director for federal legislative affairs. And in that role, I served as a liaison between the university and federal lawmakers. And after 3 years of working in federal relations at the U of A, I moved over to a role in the U of A's Office of Research as a special assistant working for Kimberly Andrews Espy, who at the time was their vice president for research. You might recognize her name because after her time at the U of A, she became provost at UTSA until 2023. And now she's the president of Wayne State University. So anyway, by the time I moved over to the research office at the University of Arizona, I'd accumulated quite a lot of experience convening committees and managing large projects. So as one of my projects, I was charged with facilitating a process bringing together the environment-related research institutes to figure out how they would like to best align and coordinate their environmental research landscape. And I couldn't believe how much I enjoyed that project. And I received quite a lot of positive feedback from the faculty involved. And I'm not saying this to brag because this is a pretty specific niche that I found I'm interested in and good at. If you find something you love to do and you're also good at, take notice of it, even if it seems like something very small. When Dr. Espy came to UTSA, I followed her to serve as Assistant Vice Provost for Academic Initiatives. And it was really a dream job because it brought several more chances to facilitate faculty-led task forces to work on new organizational structures. And I got to facilitate task forces for a couple of really big projects, including laying the groundwork for forming UTSA's College for Health Community and Policy and the Clussy College of Engineering and Integrated Design. Are any of you from those colleges? And I got better and better at running this type of process during my 3 years in that role. 4 years ago, I ran into some challenges as a parent where I needed a little more flexibility in my work life. And that's what prompted me to launch my consulting business, Heuberger Strategies. Can you all see my screen? In this role, I facilitate work group-led task forces for universities in strategic planning and visioning processes, from facilitating the future state integrated design process of Penn State University's Commonwealth campuses, to facilitating a new school process for Portland State University, to planning and working together with UTSA faculty on ideation processes and research. No 2 days have been alike, and it is truly a dream job. Having my own business and working with universities in 3 different time zones. You might recognize one of my projects, which was facilitating a task force last spring to help lay the groundwork for UTSA's new College of AI, Cyber, and Computing. I don't know if maybe some of you are going to be in that college. One of the many, many exciting things going on at UTSA right now. And I can't even tell you how much I learn from my clients every day. So since all of you are in grad school or are postdocs, I do want to emphasize that even though I have an unconventional career path for someone with a PhD, I continue to view my PhD as one of my greatest career assets. For example, my experience in teaching and research helps me understand the needs of campus units and serve as a more effective facilitator with faculty task forces. What I would most like to leave you with is to be bold in trying out interesting opportunities that seem fun, even if they don't seem like the opportunities you were originally training for. There are so many different and exciting ways to apply the expertise you've been cultivating in your graduate education. And when you find something you love to do that you're also good at, or that you can imagine you might become good at, take notice, even if it seems like something small, because those are the types of observations that can lead you to a blue ocean in the career world where your combination of skills could be truly unique. And then you won't even believe how well all the puzzle pieces of your previous experiences have come together to shape who you are. So that's my career story. And with that, I will take any questions that you all have.